Sharp Pointy Things. Today we're going to look at Damascus steel and take care of a couple of folk myths that seem to show up. A lot of people may be aware Damascus steel originally was Wootz steel, crucible steel, out of India and Sri Lanka. They had mountain sides with winds that were very favorable for building furnaces, reducing ore, and they had crucible steel. They were pouring the iron into typically wooden cases. It would carbonize the inside, draw carbon out from the charcoal surface, and you get a dendritic structure inside. I'm showing a picture here of a piece from my collection that is Wootz steel, later production, probably the 1800s. So this went on for a long time. Other cultures learned how to make crucible steel. And it was sold through Damascus, so it became known as Damascus steel. Then it was forged, folded, layered, etc. Everyone did pattern welding, where they used different pieces of metal from different, either from different reductions or scrap material, and forged stuff together. And that's become generically known as Damascus steel. Both terms are correct these days. It's like, it's just to become a generic term. There's a lot of commercial Damascus out there now. Pakistan particularly has developed an industry where they produce entire sheets and plates of pattern welded steel, sometimes mixed with nickel for contrast. When you etch it, the steel turns dark, the nickel stays bright. They've got engine lathes, press brakes, and they're forging huge sheets, grinding them to get patterns in them, forging them down, and basically it doesn't cost much more than buying commercial steel in the quantities they're producing it. And a lot of that stuff is available for knife makers in this country, and there are makers here who still make their own. There's a couple of US companies who make small quantities, but a lot of it's imported, a lot of it's sold as finished knives. And a common misconception that shows up is when you see one of these that, well, they're laser etched. So we'll take a close look here at one, and I'll explain what's wrong when someone says that. So this is a commercially produced knife. Well, they're handmade, but they produce lots by our overseas partner. We import and ship a lot of these. Bone handle, brass fittings. It's a hunting knife. This is pattern welded steel, 1075 high carbon and high nickel. Now, there are blades where they either chemically etched, usually with acid, or laser engraved a surface. Those will only have two colors. They will be very consistent. Well, actually, they'll be the same color. They'll be very consistent. And the pattern will not continue over the spine and onto the other side. It will be, they're very obvious. You'll hear people say that, well, if you can see the edge, it's not real Damascus because the pattern goes all the way to the edge. Well, it did when it was forged, and then the surface is acid etched to show the pattern. Japanese swords don't do that. I can show one of those in a few minutes. So this is a modern technique to make it obvious that it is layered. If we look at this side, I went ahead and put this on my buffing wheel. Now, this was a fairly deep etch. The pattern is still visible to an extent, but you'll notice that towards the tip, it turns into normal looking steel, and so does the edge. It is multiple layers of steel. If you polish it down, it's not obvious. It will slowly age over time. I have people show up at the booth and insist, oh, well, yeah, that's fake. If you want to put the money down and buy the piece and put a hacksaw through it, I guarantee, sprinkle some acid or vinegar on it, you will see layers inside the steel. I've also heard idiocy, they just hammer wire into the surface. If they did, that would be a form of pattern welding. But if you get wire that hot in a oxygenated atmosphere, it basically just vaporizes and burns. So they are actually forging, folding, layering the material. Again, there's stuff made in the US, there's stuff made overseas. It's become an entire industry. The technique was never lost, it just became less prevalent because modern billet steels were perfectly functional. This is largely for show. It's not significantly better in most ways than a modern piece of uniform steel is. This particular piece is going to be for sale to help support the channel. Go ahead and email us, and it's $50. It used to be that commercial Damascus in the US 20 years ago was $100 an inch, and now it's the same price as carbon steel in most cases. We'll pause a moment here and I'll put down a Japanese sword and you'll be able to see the very subtle pattern on that. So this is a Japanese sword. This is a gunto. It's in military fittings from World War II. The blade actually is about 400 years old. It's signed by the maker, authenticated and identified. And if you look very closely, you might just see some grain and layering to this material. The Japanese polish theirs down to a high polish, which makes it more resistant to rust than the etched surface. And it absolutely has layers, they're just not very visible. So the whole, whether you can see the layers or not, is not specifically a tell on whether it's pattern welded or not. Also, the people obsess over the number of layers, that you have to have 112 layers, yada yada. That depends on the materials you're using, how it's been manipulated, and every time you fold it and forge it and weld it, you burn some of the material away and have a risk of having a flaw, either a cold shut or hot and crumbling metal, and potential disaster. And if you fold it sufficiently, you get basically a very uniform medium carbon steel. So the whole point of the pattern welding was that it allowed you to use different qualities of metal. Some will be more ductile, some will be harder, and then along the edge, the two of those will give you a very fine serrated edge that cuts very well, but you'll still have ductility and resistance to impact. Eventually they went to using a hard edge, a softer back, core wrapped in material. There's dozens of different ways of doing it, both in Japan and elsewhere, and then these days we just use modern steels. So with Damascus steel, as with modern steels, what you're looking for is consistency of material. A heat treat test can be useful, although it can vary across the material. You want to know the quality of the maker, are they reliable, and not obsess over the number of layers, and not decide that just because it's inexpensive that it's probably laser etched, which would be a lot of work to go to. Chemical etching with acid and a screen over it is commonly done, but it's usually very obvious. I say the pattern is very consistent. You have one color of material, it's rather deep. If you see actual differentiation and variability to the pattern, it is almost certainly actually Damascus and of decent quality. You just have to assess it as you would any other knife. You know the drill below, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, so we can do more of these videos. The website is Sharp Pointy Things. It's largely custom stuff and vintage stuff. It varies from time to time, but these videos are meant to be informative. Thank you very much.